or if you have not met me before, my name is Caroline Fry. I'm the Advocacy and Media Manager for Colorado Common Cause. First of all, great turnout. Thank you all so much for coming to this. Obviously, we're discussing a very interesting topic tonight. It's been in the news lately, so thank you all so much for coming out. This is a Colorado Common Cause event. We have these happy hours on the first Thursday of every month here at the Irish Snug. Tonight, we're here discussing a hot topic, fake news. So Common Cause has an interest in this because we feel like we cannot be good citizens if we do not have adequate information to let us know about what is happening in the public sphere with our government. So we're going to be discussing fake news tonight, alternative facts, as one of the servers told me when I told them we were going to be doing an event on fake news tonight. So I'm pleased to welcome our two guests to lead the conversation. Here we have Jason Saltzman. He's a progressive journalist who blogs regularly at bigmedia.org, Colorado Times reporter, and Colorado Polls. Jason was a media critic for the Rocky Mountain News from 2004 until it closed in 2009. He's the author of 3 books, including Making the News, a guide for activists and nonprofits. And his articles have appeared in the Christian Science Monitor, the Harvard Journal on Press Politics, Huffington Post, LA Times, and Newsweek. So welcome. Over here we have Ari Armstrong. He is the publisher of FreedomOutlook.com. He says he started writing online about politics and culture in 1998, before the term blog had been coined. So, good for you. He has written for the Objective Standard and Complete Colorado and has appeared on CNN, Denver's 9 News, Devil's Advocate, The Daily Ledger Show, and other TV and radio shows. He is also the author of Reclaiming Liberalism and other essays on personal and economic freedom, and a book that I really want to read, The Values of Harry Potter, Lessons for Muggles. So, welcome, Ari. Thank you so much.
So one thing I want to be clear about is I'm a progressive blogger. I'm not an unbiased journalist. I'm a paid blogger from the progressive side. That doesn't mean I try to be fair and accurate, but I don't pretend to be a real journalist. So just so you know that. So I'm going to tell the story quickly of the Fake News Pledge, which is an initiative that I've launched from my blog, which calls on people, everyday citizens and legislators to stop spreading fake news. So what happened was, during the last election, in my blogging, people started sending me these Facebook posts that were clearly crazy wrong, like seriously factually incorrect. And we started collecting them, and some of the examples confirms Hillary sold weapons to ISIS. Polly Lawrence, a state senator, she had one that said, "Whoa, Hillary caught on hot mic trashing Beyonce with racial slurs." Gordon Klingenschmidt from Colorado Springs, our favorite. He's not up here. He's up here. He said, "It's over. WikiLeaks exposes the assassination of Scalia." And then Laura Woods, Senator Laura Woods from Lakewood, or Arvada, this is hers here. It says, "Courts quietly confirm that one children's vaccine does cause autism." So what we did is we looked at the Facebook pages of all our legislators at the State House. That's all Colorado legislators, Democrat and Republican, and we found the fake news over a 2-year period, and this is what we found. It was after that we developed. We thought there's got to be a way to stop this, so we developed the Fake News Pledge, and I'll just read it to you real quick. It says, "As an elected official, I agree that the spread of fake news on Facebook and other social media platforms has a toxic effect on rational civic discourse. And I understand that when community leaders spread fake news, we legitimize it. By our example, we encourage people to play fast and loose with the facts, and we blur the lines between real journalism and fabricated stories masquerading as news. So, to promote informed and reasoned debate, I pledge not to knowingly spread fake news. If I accidentally do so by sharing or liking or posting inaccurate information packaged to look like news, So it's not all information, but information is packaged to look like news. I will remove the falsehood as soon as possible and post a correction and an explanation of why I posted it. If it's deemed false or inaccurate by Snopes, PolitiFact, FactCheck.org, or a respected news outlet, so those are the arbiters. That's really key, because if we're ever going to have a discussion about what's true, we have to have arbiters, and that's where it gets really complicated, especially for conservatives. If it's deemed false by those entities, the information in my Facebook post will be removed, or a detailed analysis will be posted explaining why. So they don't even have to remove it. They just have to explain why if those folks say it's false. That's the fake news pledge. So we asked these folks who spread it to sign the pledge and remove the fake news. And a couple of them did it. Polly Lawrence, to her credit, Kit Rupe, but others didn't. Ray Scott didn't, Tim Neville didn't, Laura Woods didn't. They just left it there, still on their website. So then after that, we went and we asked all the legislators, Democrat and Republican, to sign the pledge. And we've had 4 folks do it so far. And they are Susan Lontine, Representative Lontine. She was facing a candidate who was an absurd example of a fake news spreader on Facebook in her last election. We didn't even look at actually candidates that were running. They're even worse, many of them. They put up stuff that's just way off the spectrum wrong. Also, we have, let's see, the others who signed it are Senator Irene Aguilar, Dominic Moreno, Senator Moreno, and Representative Mike Foote. So those are our 4. So our goal is to try to get more, as many as possible to sign it, and then try to spread the word that we can, as citizens, try to do something about fake news in this way, and possibly put the pressure on those who spread it not to do it. I mean, the biggest problem we have is in discussing fake news is sort of focusing the discussion. Who decides what's fake, and how can we stop it? And so the fake news pledge kind of focuses an amorphous discussion of fake news onto a specific this body of decision makers in our own location. So we'll see if more do sign it. One Republican, some folks have said they won't sign it, like Senator Tim Neville. He said that each individual has to be the arbiter of fake news. He didn't like Snopes or FactCheck.org or the ones that we have. Senator Kevin Lundberg, you may be familiar with him. He said that the fake news pledge smacks of a new censorship. That was his line. And then Representative Gordon Klingenschmidt said he avoids pledges of all kinds. And it's the avoiding pledges part that I think is tripping up the Democrats. Even a pledge like this, which is basically a promise not to lie, and if you do lie, to explain why or if someone thinks you're lying, to explain why you're doing it, the Democrats are saying that some of them just will not sign pledges, period. So we have to, combat that with the argument that this is such a basic, tenet. It's such a basic requirement of our democracy not to do this thing that it overrides a concern about a pledge. Now, Ari has decided he doesn't like the pledge, not because he doesn't agree with the sentiment, but because he doesn't think it's necessary, I think. And I don't know if you want to talk about that, but you can say whatever you want.
So, I apologize, I cannot stand up because my cable is not long enough, so I'm going to remain seated. I'm being discriminated against already. But I want to start by correcting a falsehood, a blatant falsehood that Jason has already spilled in this room when he describes himself as not a real journalist. Because, honestly, this work that he did, no one else in the world thought to look at the state legislators' records that I know of and actually look, both sides, Democrats and Republicans, and say, What are they actually posting? Is there actually a factual basis there? Are they correcting it if they get it wrong? And one of the things I especially like is that he dinged Ray Scott. And I don't know if you follow this, but I'm from Palisades, so that's where the Daily Sentinel is. And Ray Scott is the same guy who accused the Daily Sentinel of being a fake news operation. And here he is posting fake news on his own social media accounts, which we know because of Jason's work. So I thought we'd start there. But I have just a general question. Everybody raise their hand in this room who voted for Donald Trump this last November. Okay, so maybe some people weren't being honest. I don't know, but I asked that only to point out that different groups who might have a meeting about fake news will probably have a different idea about what fake news is, and they'll have a different set of examples that really gets their ire up, right? And so let's just try to keep that in mind. Now, I did not vote for Donald Trump. I was explaining to Jason before we had to get going here that I was independent. I was an unaffiliated voter for a long time, and then I joined the Republican Party last year. But I joined because I wanted to do what I could to keep Donald Trump from getting the nomination. So I went through the whole caucus convention process. So maybe that'll give me a little bit of cred in this room here. Obviously, we were successful in Colorado, but not at the national level at keeping him from the nomination. So I have just a quick note on the fake news pledge. I think it's a great idea for Jason to promote it and to hold legislators accountable. Look, they don't need to sign a pledge for us to hold them accountable to it, right? We can point out when they're posting fake news. And my position was, look, if you're a Republican legislator, you might look askew at a fake news pledge put to you by Jason Salzman, author of, Why I Love Barack Obama and How You Can Help Him in the Next, Like, I could just see, you might wonder to yourself, is this going to be used against me in an unfair partisan way to kind of hammer me versus how it would be used against Democrats? I think that's a reasonable concern. But I had an idea about how to look at fake news and what it is, because this is one of the issues that Jason's pledge has raised. Is like, what is fake news and how do you see it? Should I give that little spiel, or do we want to? I don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and I finally decided this. When you look in the dictionary, under a whole bunch of terms, you will see multiple definitions. So I want to give you a 1, 2, 3-part definition for fake news. The first is what is most obvious. It's intentionally manufactured news meant to mislead the public. So here's an example. You know that there was recently a horrific chemical attack in Syria. Well, in my Facebook feed, this was just like 2 hours ago, there was a claim that this was actually perpetrated by local anti-Assad people in order to bring the United States into the conflict in Syria, right? And this has actually been promoted by some other bigger names. So this is an actual view out there, so it's fake news. Now, I think this is probably coming, hey, it might even be coming from the Russians directly. It serves their interests, right? But this seems to be manufactured on purpose. The definition 2 is people really believe it, but they're just idiots and they get the facts wrong. So you can think of lots of examples, right? But they're not intending to manufacture falsehoods. They just do because they're irresponsible. They're conspiracy theorists. One quick example: there was a thing on Gateway Pundit about this anti-Trump flyer being circulated in Colorado, and it was this whole big conspiracy with the party leaders. And I wrote a critique of this because I know the one person who distributed this flyer. And I'm like, everything he wrote was wrong about this, and here's why. I laid out the facts. But I don't think the author there was intending to mislead. I think he was just a bad journalist. Okay. So the third type, I would say, is a reputable news organization that makes a mistake. So, for example, the New York Times recently claimed that Ivanka Trump is married to Donald Trump. Now, which is obviously false, but we all know that was just a silly editing error, right? But here's another recent example. The New York Times published an article to the effect that international applications to colleges, universities was down. And that was the whole theme of the article. Well, an economist named Tyler Cowen read the original report on which the article was based, and he said, well, look, what the report actually says is that it's up in some schools and down in some schools, and it's kind of not cool for the New York Times to list only half the story, right? I'll actually include that I don't know. So you can argue that that's an example of fake news in that respect. So I'm going to say that if we call something fake in that respect, right, it has to be very delimited. It's this particular story has this particular problem, which I can show you as a problem and offer the corrective. Then say fake news. But this thing like, oh, we're just going to call the entire Daily Sentinel fake news because they disagreed with me on some point. That's, I think, very irresponsible. And I also have some ideas of how we should look at the word bias and how we should look at the word partisanship, because we're both partisans. But I would not say that makes us biased. But maybe we can, I don't know, talk about that later. So I don't know exactly the direction you wanted to go, but that was my lead-in.
Would you like my 3 point?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Carl. Carl, I forgot to say, don't want to put you on the spot, but Carl will be speaking at the Tax Day rally in March next Saturday. He is on our board of directors, and we're really, really excited that he's going to be speaking. I'm so sorry, I forgot. I was going to say that earlier. But
both of those are fine. Sing it and not sing it. It's also fine. So there, I've noticed this when I talk about biased media or fake news. Some people will say there is nothing but bias. Everybody is biased. So I guess their argument is if everybody's biased, they might as well listen to the bias that they like, right? That makes them feel good or outraged or feel connected or feel worthwhile or just as outrageous. That makes them feel outraged. How do you so they've lost. They don't believe that any news is real. What can we do about it? What do you do about that? How do you react?
Yeah, I think that the profession of journalism, its goal, its primary mission is to try to recognize bias and think and what journalism tries to do is get at the truth, recognize your own bias, just like a judge or like other professionals, and write and express that truth. And so we need to somehow continue to promote journalism as a necessary function in democracy that mediates between these people who are so biased individually. So I think everyone does have a bias, but the purpose of journalism is to address that.
I want to draw a clear distinction between partisan or advocacy journalism, which is basically what we do all the time, and bias. So, for example, the New York Times piece I mentioned, I think that was actually biased. I think it can be biased in a couple of main ways. You can take a set of facts, all the facts can be true, but you can give an interpretation or spin on those facts which is not warranted or at least is highly debatable. If it's not warranted or highly debatable, maybe it belongs in the editorial page, not on the news page. The other thing you can do is you can give selectively, what was it? Okay. Oh yeah, so you can just give some of the facts and not others, right? You can be selective in the facts you present. So every single item in your news story could be absolutely 100% true. But if you're not giving the other relevant facts, that is biased. So what I would say, how I would relate that to fake news is in egregious cases where it's clearly they're just being irresponsibly biased, I would be comfortable calling that fake news in that respect. But that's far, far different from advocating a group or a point of view. I mean, we both have point of views that we advocate. So in other words, when I take a set of facts and I give my interpretation of those facts, what does this mean? But I tell you, here's the conclusion I'm supporting, right? I'm being openly partisan, and I think that's totally fine. And that's, like look at Vince Carroll. Look at how much original research Vince Carroll did on the editorial page when he was writing for the big papers here in the state. And I think that's how he's a great example of how you can be partisan without being biased in the sense that I'm discussing.
And wrong.
Yeah, no, look, but you're wrong. You're wrong in a way that people can. You present where people might disagree with you, at least implicitly, right? Like, here's my ideological conclusion based on this set of facts. And then the reader can say, well, look, I disagree with your ideological conclusion, but the facts can be true or false. That's the big problem. Are we getting the facts right? Are we including the relevant facts? So a lot of people like this Gateway Pundit article, right? They were just getting the facts wrong. So that's not, so let's not say, well, let's read this BS journalism because everyone is biased. If they can't even get the basic facts right, we can't even talk about whether they're biased. They don't even have the basic facts right. Bias only, we can only talk about bias realistically when you have the basic facts right. And then are you missing some other facts or giving us false spin?
So do you think then the media is making a mistake by claiming to be unbiased rather than truthful?
No, I think I think the news media, as opposed to editorial media, should claim and strive to be unbiased and should be it. So when you write an article for the New York Times and the report you base your article on says, well, look, international applicants are up in some schools and down in some schools. Don't just say they're down in some schools, right? Don't do that. Then you're being biased. And even the big newspapers do that, and obviously, small fry papers do that.
I've never liked unbiased because I prefer fair and accurate. Because there is a bias, you cannot get rid of your bias totally. You just strive for that. It's a goal.
I think one of the challenges with legislators is they are exquisitely trained in spin. They all have been in front of videotape. They've been tested. They know exactly how to take a message and turn it to the three key messages of their party or their position or whatever the subject is. So for them to commit not to spread fake news, that's just inches away from spin, in my view, because they already are using the ability and what the media, they know how to speak to the media, they know how long to talk to them. Back to senators in the 50s, they knew to say, do you want 30 seconds, 90 seconds, or 60 seconds. They're so skilled in speaking to the media that they can parse their words down to the time that they're going to get the coverage. So I don't know how we can, we almost need like this third party, all-knowing, perfect arbiter of truth, because for them I think to sign this pledge is saying, that looks a lot like spin when I tell someone it's not quite the way that it is.
Yeah, well, the fake news beautifully cuts through that problem because it says, here are the arbiters. And can we as a society agree that professional journalism, as represented by Snopes, factcheck.org, PolitiFact, and credible news outlets, meaning which there's some room there to bring in conservatives who don't like those guys, that focuses on that particular point. They might say, oh, I hate, and conservatives do. They say they don't trust Snopes. They say they won't sign the pledge. But I think you can't have you need ground rules for rational civic discourse, and having arbiters that are identified as, arbiters of the truth is a necessity, and that's what journalism functions as. And the pledge focuses those journalist entities in that role.
And that makes sense, but that won't stop spinning. And spinning is in its own way an untruth to me.
Right, but
it's not addressing the immediate situation, and it's turning it into an answer about a question that wasn't asked. And so, to me, that needs to be a part of the conversation. Seems to me.
Can I?
That's right.
Can I add just one point though? I mean, I think I basically agree with Jason about at least get the basic standards right. Like, you can't just spread blatant falsehoods. Okay, let's all agree on that. But I worry that we, the voters and the populace, have sort of pushed politicians to be spinners because they know that if they say one thing wrong, unscripted, right, both sides are ready to pounce. And I wish that we could reach a place where we allow people to correct themselves, to change their minds. You can't change your mind. You cannot have a rational introspection and change your mind without being a flip-flopper, right? Well, why is it flip-flopping? Maybe it's just, hey, you're an intelligent, rational guy who is changing your mind in light of more thinking and more evidence. So I think that part of the blame is on us by not allowing politicians to be honest, because they know they'll take punishment for it.
That's a good point. And the fact is, if we saw somebody do that, we would admire them for being more human and more like us, who misspeak all the time. So that's an excellent point.
Still one right here.
I guess I have a question about whether this is really about journalists or about people and people's perceptions. Because what we've talked about here is that there will always have been people willing to produce fake news and to give an opposite point of view from the norm. whatever the norm is. And people are willing to consume that because you know what? I don't want to hear something I don't believe. I want to hear something I agree with and that justifies me in my position. And in this age of, you can really indulge yourself in that as much as you want. 100%. You can ignore real news and buy whatever the fake news is, whether it is the liberal fake news or the conservative fake news. It's kind of akin to having another drink. I'm going to keep drinking until I fall dead. How do we get journalistic sobriety from the people to say, you know what, I've had enough of this stuff that really supports my side of things. It's not Assad. It's those damn rebels. But at a certain point, when do I say, you know, I need to look at something else? How do we do that?
Well, I think one way is to try to get our leaders not to spread fake news and do it themselves. I mean, that's part of the idea of the fake news pledge. But also, it's about promoting journalism. I think at a basic level, that doesn't do that. It's convincing people who have dropped their Denver Post subscriptions to get them again. And people have to pay for this profession, or it's going to go away. So I don't know.
How do you do that? It's so intoxicating for people to say, "Wow, look at what I've done. I've elected Donald Trump. I have power."
I know. I don't.
I think to some degree, some people are already starting to step back and recognize that there's a problem, right? People don't like to be dupes, especially of antagonistic foreign agents, generally. I mean, so I think that there's some awareness already. I would recommend Ann Applebaum was on a podcast with Sam Harris recently, and she talks a lot about the Russian history of fake news, of spreading propaganda. And so she saw this coming in a way that most of us did not. So this fake, like, it took a lot of us, we had to learn what this was in the course of it happening. And so you might listen to that, and she has some good discussions. And she also talks about how, the internet is still in the disruption phase. And there was also a disruption phase in radio. And it took people a long time, actually, years, to figure out how to deal with that. I mean, she points out, who are the big first users of radio? In large part, it was the fascists in Europe. And so she points out that, look, it may not be super easy to solve this problem, but it may be solvable, with a program over a span of years. Anyway, I recommend that.
Hope. That's good.
What was her name?
Ann Applebaum. Go to samharris.org, and then one of his recent podcasts features her. She was into journalism in Eastern Europe, Russia, for a long time.
I can tell who put their hand up first, so just shout out your question.
I think you had your hand up for a while. If you're done.
I was going to say almost equal to fake news is false equivalency. So you report both sides of the story as if they're both roughly the same. When there's many times when one side really has their facts together and their issues together, and the other side is bringing them. So that's almost fake news also.
It's a good observation for sure.
I've got a question about Fox News, because my family tends to watch Fox News. My father, when he was alive, would say if I want the conservative position, I'll go to Fox News. If I want the liberal position, I'll go to CNN. And I didn't see CNN as liberal at the time. And I've gone to hotels where they have Fox News on all the time, and they're upset if you ask them to change because it had customers who get into fistfights over things. So I just wanted to know, do you agree that Fox News isn't really a news media because it's very political and it's trying to get a political point of view across, and it's not even trying to be neutral, or is that something that is not correct? Because I think that's a big problem in the U.S. today, that many people think that it's a legitimate news source, and
I bet more of your friends watch it than mine. No, just kidding.
Well, probably 3/4 of my friends refer to the Clinton News Network, right? So it definitely are different views on this. But look, if you just go to foxnews.com and read every single article on their website page, I doubt that you would find a single substantive error. Because most of the articles they're publishing are just the news of the day. It's either straight from Reuters or the AP, or it's sort of their reporters writing essentially the same story. And you're not really going to find a lot there. I mean, most of it is just basic, what's going on, you know? Hey, today the Republicans killed the filibuster with the Gorsuch nomination, right? It's hard to screw that up. What are they going to say? Oh no, they didn't kill the filibuster, you know? Nobody says that. So there's a certain level where, you know, Fox News is not comparable to, say, Breitbart, where I would view every article with suspicion, which is not to say that everything they publish is crap or wrong, but I view everything at Breitbart with suspicion. I view everything with Gateway Pundit with suspicion. My default with Fox News is it's probably true. And I think that, you know, go back to the question. All of your friends are not like all of my friends. I have friends like your friends, but I have friends who are nothing like your friends. I'm generalizing, right? But just based on the Trump question, I'm drawing some generalizations, but I'm sure into exceptions. So I think that there's a tendency among some crowds to overemphasize the problems with Fox without a lot of substance. I mean, show me the money. Where's all these fake stories coming from Fox? Now, Fox did recently fire somebody. Like, what was that story? They fired one of their, the judge. I can't remember the details. Anyway.
Napolitano.
So, Napolitano. I can't remember the details offhand, but certainly there are some of their, especially when you get to the commentators, you're going to find stuff that is factually challenged sometimes. And, you know, but as far as their straight news stories, they basically don't get it wrong as far as I can tell. Is their headline different from their CNN headline? Yeah. It's a lot different. If you look at the headlines, and there is a clear slant, I will say. If you look at the two side by side on any given day, the headlines will definitely give a different angle to it. But I don't have any more faith in CNN than I have in Fox. But I have a very skeptical view. I don't have any faith in anybody, ultimately, because I have, you know, when you see errors in the major media networks, you have to approach everything with a certain amount of thought and reflection and skepticism. And ultimately, if their facts aren't ringing true, there's probably something to look into there.
First of all, if I could, let me give an amen to the last two statements you made. You know, first responsibility, I think, has to come to all of us. First responsibility for journalists, and I'm surprised neither one of you addresses, is to do credible reporting. And I don't care about Snopes or whoever else you're looking at. Get the facts yourself. And I mean, get the facts. What happened to the days when they went to the source? I mean, I think most of us in here are old enough to remember Bernstein and Woodward, but they went in and dug up the information. They didn't see who else was saying this and who else was saying that, and make up the rest of the stuff and make it sensational, which is how Trump got elected. Everybody from CBS News right on down fell for all the sensationalism, and that's what really promoted him. We did it for him, or they did it for him. But the other part is like, as readers, as the public, as the citizens, we need to look at what we're reading. You know, not who's saying this and all of that. Who are they quoting? Where are they getting their information from? You know, everybody's trying to fast track everything and take the easy way or lazy way out or whatever it is. We don't look at what we're even reading. And where are the facts? Who are they quoting? Did they say this? Did they say somebody inside said this? You know, where's the information coming from? You know, not just some other, you know, if you look at the articles that you mentioned earlier, you know, we're talking about Fox News, on the basic thing, AP, Reuters, UPI, all of them, those guys are quoting where they saw this, where they got the information, you know, some patrolman, some witness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if I could, I don't want to get way out of this field. But you can't totally, you know, I don't throw a whole lot of stock into it. But in the sense of like what you're talking about, like what happened in Syria, I mean, it's been a long time. But there were times to use the term, yeah.
Everyone get their tomatoes. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I mean, in the history of activism stuff, there's been agent provocateurs that have done some crazy, wild stuff.
Well,
So you can't totally, so we have to dig deeper for the facts. We have to ask the questions as a responsible public, I think.
Do you think there's, this may be far-fetched, but do you think there's ever a role for the law to somewhere get involved?
For the who?
The law.
Oh.
We have consumer protection laws which prevent, at least in the commercial setting, not political, people from intentionally stating and misrepresenting facts. And they're selling their product. In some respects, we have politicians, and they're probably immune under the First Amendment. I know political speech is given a lot more of that. But I'm thinking about the third parties, like people that intentionally put facts, certainly convey it as facts, put it out there. Do you think there's ever some sort of role in there as a secondary check on that kind of stuff? Or is that more political speech and the law is going to have to stand back and just let the marketplace of ideas figure out what's true and what's not true?
Well, there's slander. There's ways to get at a private entity and defamation. But yeah, so that there is a role for that. But I don't think that. If someone were to take that route, I think it'd be laudable. If it meets those definitions.
It's tough against politicians, but maybe there are these other non-politician commercial enterprises that are intentionally doing that. You would think there would be some sort of role.
Yeah, well, because the primary driver of fake news is profit. Because as you've all read, they set up these companies. Some of them in Macedonia or elsewhere. They're young kids who are they create the fake news. And they put it on Facebook, and they put Google ads on it, and they make a lot of money. And so, but how you sue them, who knows? But it's a thought for sure.
I have a question. Okay, if you were a journalist at the Daily Briefing, how would you handle Spicer? Spicer.
Go for it.
Because if you're getting all of that fake news from the top.
I think, I don't know.
I'd show them Saturday Night Live.
But one thing that was good one thing I noticed that I was really happy about is when, I don't know all the details, but at some point certain outlets were excluded from a certain news briefing. And the other outlets did complain about that. And so
that was great.
I think at least they need to, if someone's asking a real question, don't let that slip under the rug. Everybody asks the same question until he answers it. I think that kind of stuff helps.
We also kicked some of the journalists out.
Yeah.
I think
Look,
they're bad,
I don't think Sean Spicer's primary goal is to convey the truth. What do you do about that?
He's got the worst job on this planet. Worst job.
But what are the consequences for him doing that daily to our country?
So my question is following up this gentleman's is, what's your opinion of the primary sources, the starting sources? We hear about the Russian bots, but we talked about bots. Where is this starting? Or is there opinions about who's doing it?
Who's promoting the fake news?
Who's developing it?
Developing it. Well, if you look on these, these fake news examples here, it's the freepatriot.org. These are websites that are some of them are set up overseas, some of them are set up in, you read about them in California. They're actually entrepreneurs. Some of them have a political bias, but mostly it's about profit. It's not about people who are set to, attack Hillary Clinton. But they're finding a market in the bias, hungry population that spreads them on Facebook from one person to another, and then they get ad revenue.
So it's not all Russian, it's in the United States.
There's been accusations that Russians have been helping nurture this, but what most of the reporting shows that it's actually profit-driven entities with some overlay of conservative conservative ideology in some cases.
Just piggybacking off of that, so even if I'm curious, like I see that picture of the doctor and the baby, and I'm like, oh, I wonder if this is about like anti-vaxxer, that kind of thing, and I click on it. Do they make money because I clicked on it? And
Yes, that's how it works.
Not the headlines. I think it's just ads.
Try to vet it as a reputable source.
No,
what
I
happens
think,
is
I think only if you click on the ads. Isn't that true?
no, you go. Well, there's two. You go through. You click on that website, and then you get a page that has ads on it, and there's some amount of money just those the impressions.
Oh.
And then if you click through the ad, then you get even more money.
It's
So
just known as it's clickbait. So I mean, you hear everybody tell you don't click on it. It's just clickbait. But my question is a bigger question. It relates to what you all have been asking. Isn't this a broader problem with democracy? I mean, democracy is not about entertaining yourself to only hear one side of the representation, or whatever side it is. I mean, democracy, it requires you to have a thoughtful analysis of what is happening so you can make a decision when you're voting on leaders. If you're only watching one side, I don't even watch the Steve Colbert thing, and I read the paper. I spend an hour a day reading 3 papers to get news.
what's wrong with you?
The problem is, what's wrong with everybody? If it's just to be entertained, you're never going to have democracy work right. So my bigger question to the journalists is this. I supported the print media when it was like in my driveway. I pay for subscriptions because I know people have to do the digging to give me a factual report. But until we as a broader audience say this is a democratic problem across the political spectrum, and it takes time to do it, it's work, it's not entertainment, and people need to be advocating for that. And the journalists have to do the same thing. Isn't that so? Isn't it true?
It's true. It is.
It's a hard problem, and I've had to be a little bit self-reflective too, in the sense that, being more ready to recognize the great journalism being done and not just nitpick where there's problems, and there are problems, to make it so that I'm not feeding this narrative that, oh well, journalism per se is just crap. It doesn't matter what you read; it's all junk. That's definitely not true. Right? The New York Times makes mistakes, but they're pretty good. But I want to put down a warning here regarding this idea of an arbiter. Okay, so let's say there were an arbiter of, let's say there's actually a government agency cracking down on fake news. If we're looking at the federal level, who's the guy appointing the people in these positions? Okay? And so,
What's the fake news?
right, exactly. And so I think look, people spreading fake news is an intense, incredible danger to our civilization. Having an arbiter of news gives you Vladimir Putin, ultimately, or at least risks that, where you have an arbiter of news, and their job is to spread their version of the news, which in Russia's case is used generally propaganda. So that's fake news terrifies me. Arbiters of news, it's like times 10 or exponentially terrifying.
So that's what we rely on journalism to do, is to just cut through that and say, here we are seeking the truth, and this is not the truth. And you can disagree with that and say so, and say why. That's what it boils down to.
I'm going to attack you in a way. I'm going to propose that TV nightly news. Okay, I know a few journalists, and I trust them, and they all are highly ethical in the journalistic sense, and I try to follow the Columbia Journalism Review so I can keep up with that kind of thing, with Hangout maybe. They're not the problem. It's maybe the producers who assemble the show. And I have the feeling that every nightly news TV show is not news, it's a kind of entertainment. And the people behind it who care deeply about the truth, but that's not what comes out. That actually what comes out is a kind of reassuring or stimulating, or a kind of truth does not enter into it. And that I think that laid the foundation for Fox, and then that laid the foundation for Breitbart.
Well, there's a great book called "Entertaining Ourselves to Death," which is about how journalism has become more entertainment oriented over time, and you certainly see that on local TV news and on TV news and more than the print media. But that's the way it's always been, and a journalist has to balance out entertainment, which just means drawing a reader or a viewer into their story, with factual representation of that story. And his or her efforts to seek the truth. So entertainment itself isn't bad. It can be it's part of what you try to do as a journalist, to try to hook people. It's just when you put entertainment values above, journalism values consistently, then you have a problem. And we have that generally in our society, obviously. But I'm okay with entertainment in journalism as long as it doesn't subvert the facts.
Well, humor, getting to the gentleman's point there, humor can also be a motivator, and in a sense of, we're all crazy and hyper and everything like this, and sitting back and kind of laughing, kind of helps restore the balance, I should say. Yeah. So humor and Colbert can have their place.
I think so.
I guess sort of the ultimate expression of humor is sarcasm, and you can look at The Onion. If you want sort of fake news, fake headlines, that's the place. But boy, it sure can focus very well on some really stupid things that are going on in society. So I think in that sense, fake news, Onion Life to me provides a really good outlet because it's very entertaining and it can really point out the really stupid things that are going on. But it is fake news completely.
But there's a difference in the fact that they are blatantly fake news and they tell you that it is.
That's
right. There's a big difference.
Some of these fake news sites, by the way, they put when you click through, there's a disclaimer that says none of this is true. I think that's on for legal reasons.
Yeah, on April 1st.
There's an NPR story. They actually tracked down one of these propagators of fake news. He actually had a site here in Denver and more of a nationally oriented site. And when they finally cornered him, his explanation was, well, I'm really doing this to try to show who the dupes are, right? So he's performing a social service by letting the idiots self-reveal themselves, right? Do I think that's, I regard his explanation of his motives as perhaps implausible, but you do have all kinds of weird descriptions. You have all kinds of weird things going on in media.
To circle around a little bit back to the spin point, a thing that our legislators are culpable in is running gotcha bills so that they can make horribly distorting campaign ads. They'll run a bill that has no chance of passing. They'll put something in there, and then they'll make an ad out of that something and say so-and-so voted against or voted for this, and the ads are as bad as the fake news that we're talking about, because it says something totally untrue, and there's nothing that I can see that we can do about really false or drastically misleading campaign ads. It just adds to the poison that we're in.
I would rather see, instead of trying to solve the problem at the side of the production of the news, I'd rather see more efforts to solve the problem at the consumption of the news. If we just have generally a society where people are like, that's BS, there's no longer much incentive to produce it.
And I'm not going to spread it on Facebook. That's the
yeah, right. And it's obviously hard because we're talking about 300 and some odd million people, individuals in the United States, and obviously you got your Alex Joneses along with all of you who are perfectly rational and critical in your consumption of the news.
Well, you guys are news generators. So if we ask about how do we, like I did earlier, how do you get people to be stronger about rejecting fake news, that I think is actually an issue for psychologists or something like that.
Sign the fake news pledge.
But that doesn't, again, address the issue of the audience. Right? And you're saying, if you say that the audience needs to be smarter, I'm like, yes, make us smarter. How do we do that?
It's education, media literacy, it's very basic activism that is way
Librarians.
Obviously there's a problem with fake news that is problem is that Ari and I are reading the news from different sources with different focuses. So even though the facts are the same, we're coming away with a totally different sense of reality, which makes it hard for us to have a conversation maybe about the issues of the day. And is that because of the internet? I mean, back in the old days where you only had, 2 newspapers in town, you had far fewer options, so we were all forced to have a shared sense of what the news was. The internet has opened up the democratization of the news process, which is great in a lot of ways, but it also means that we no longer have a shared sense of what's true and what's not, and how much of our civic problem is about false information, and how much of it is about the fact that we just don't have shared information.
I think the problem is worse than shared information. It's just, it's different. At a certain point, I mean, people with different worldviews are not going to agree on certain issues. But there's also what you're likely to believe based on partisanship. So consider the Susan Rice story, and the broader story of, well, who's spying on the Trump people, and are they really spying on them? And what are the Trump people really doing with the Russians? A lot of people seem to have very strong opinions about this on one side or the other. And the more I read about this, the more I realize that there's just a lot of facts that no one seems to know, or at least that aren't publicly available. So I think that it's, one thing we can do is say, well, hell, I don't have any idea. I don't think that's a bad thing. And when it comes to, whether Susan Rice did anything immoral or illegal when it comes to unmasking the Trumpies involved in the surveillance of Russian operatives, which we know there was surveillance, right? That's a given. That's widely known. Maybe we should start criticizing people who think that they have enough facts to justify a strong opinion one way or the other. Because frankly, unless you're an insider, unless you have direct access to the information, I don't know how you possibly could in a case like that.
But even where you have facts like global climate change, it's real, it's happening, the glaciers are melting, sea levels rising, you still have all this crap. The facts, no doubt about it.
Yeah, that's true, but if we take that case, okay, look, for a long time I was a skeptic. I followed Michael, I was later than Michael Shermer, and I think for a long time that was a justifiable position to say, let's step back and say, is global warming even happening? Right? And then there's a whole bunch of secondary positions you can take. Well, if it's happening, what's causing it? Maybe it's the sun and whatever happens to do with the sun. So, but today, right, no one actually believes that. Donald Trump said that some years ago, but no one actually will tell you that global warming is not being caused, and it's not being caused substantially by human beings. Okay, let me back up. When I say no one, okay, there's a lot of Facebook friends who will say that, right? But no one in sort of a position of authority.
They deny that human causes it.
No, wait. Then there's the debate about, well, what is it? Majority? Okay, I think, yeah, you're right. I think that it's wrong to say even that it's not a majority, right? So there's a debate of magnitude. If you say that there's 100% caused by humans, I think that's clearly implausible. If you say 0%, that's clearly implausible. So what is the range, But I feel like I dug myself into a hole here. But but don't overstate the amount of disagreement here, right? I agree that the human beings emitting carbon dioxide and other gases are causing the Earth to warm over time. Now, there are still a lot of things to debate. Therefore, QED, we should have a carbon tax, right? That is not a fact. That is drawing a conclusion from a body of facts. A lot of you probably support that. I think there should not be a carbon tax, even though humans are causing global warming through emitting carbon dioxide. I think there should possibly be other government actions, but
We're going down a little bit of a rabbit hole. So one more question. Jeff has been very patient. I've seen him for the past 15 minutes to stand up. It's not because he's our board chair.
Sorry.
No, that was good. That was fine.
So what is concrete action or actions can we take to combat this problem? For example, your fake news pledge. Your pledge against fake news, spreading fake news. Can you help us provide us the information and tools to contact our legislators to get them to sign that pledge?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, because most of the, the solutions to the fake news problem have been focused on Google and Facebook, those corporations, and there hasn't been really a citizen, driven way. And this does offer that, this fake news pledge. So what you can do, it's on my website. It's called bigmedia.org, and then on the right-hand side there's a fake news pledge for elected officials. Bigmedia.org. And how you let's see, where could I send you to find you have to know who your state legislators are.
Just go to the Colorado legislature.
Yeah, right.
You can find it right there.
Right.
And
So you go to the Colorado State Legislature, Google that, and then General Assembly or whatever, and then you can ask them. There's that link that has the fake news pledge for elected officials. That's where they sign it. So if you could send that to them, that's something you could do. That'd be great. There's also a citizen version if you want to sign it as an individual, and you'll be on our mailing list. You'll get the fake news pledge newsletter.
Ari, do you have anything to add to that? You're gonna ask.
No, I think it's a good idea. No one's going to sign it, but it's a great idea to send it to them.
Hey, we got 4 already.
So, first of all, thank you all. Thank you both